5 years ago, she lost the love of her life. Today, she realizes he lost her to save her. Brianna Vance finally found peace after her mysterious divorce. Her world is made of soil, flowers, and the security of her routine. But that peace crumbles in a single instant when she locks eyes with her ex-husband, Jason Moretti, in the middle of a market. Jason, the man known in the shadows as the Architect, is the cold, ruthless CEO who commands an empire of power, and danger is his constant shadow. He left her to protect her, but now, the same threat that forced him away has found her first. With an absolute power play, Jason pulls her back into his world, confining her to the fortress of his penthouse, turning Brianna into the queen he must defend at all costs. Trapped in the same golden cage, the tension between forbidden desire and mounting fear explodes. He is the danger. He is the protector. And the love they buried is about to become the only weakness that can destroy Jason Moretti. Discover how a mafia boss risks his empire and his own life to fight for the woman he never stopped loving. A second-chance romance of suspense, high stakes, and a promise that true love is the only unbreakable contract. Hit that like button. Prepare to be consumed by this story of power and passion. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. The air in the Santa Monica Farmers Market on a Saturday morning was a chaotic, beautiful symphony. Brianna Vance knew the rhythm of it by heart. The low buzz of conversations, the harsh caw of gulls overhead, and the intoxicating layered scent of everything alive, freshly ground coffee, damp earth, and the sweet, almost dizzying aroma of her own stall. The pedal pushers. At 29, Brianna had built a life out of resilience. 5 years after her abrupt, painful divorce, she was stable, content, and shielded by a thick wall of routine. Her hands, dusted with pollen and soil, moved expertly among the arrangements. Today, it was the deep indigo of a blue thistle and the pristine white of early spring hydrangeas that held her focus. Her life was simple, beautiful, and utterly predictable. She preferred it that way. Predictable meant safe. And safety, she'd learned the hard way, was the only true luxury. Her assistant, an overly enthusiastic art student named Finn, was haggling lightheartedly with a chef over a box of exotic limes. Brianna smiled, a genuine, easy smile that rarely reached her eyes anymore. She turned to fetch a roll of burlap when the smile froze on her lips. The air shifted. It wasn't a change in the market's temperature or sound. It was an internal, seismic adjustment. The kind of awareness one gets when a silent, predatory energy enters the room. Brianna didn't need to look up. She felt the silence of his presence cut through the market noise like a surgeon's scalpel. He was standing 20 feet away, near the organic coffee stall, waiting for a cup. Jason Moretti. 5 years. 5 years without seeing the man whose exit had cleaved her life in two. He hadn't changed, not outwardly. The same devastating, dark precision. He wore a charcoal gray bespoke suit that looked both expensive and like a second skin, a uniform of the relentless power he commanded. His posture was a lesson in restrained menace, every line of his body sharp, coiled, and utterly still. He wasn't just observing the market. He was assessing it, charting its weaknesses, and calculating the fastest route through it. He was the man they called the Architect in the shadows, a moniker that spoke less of street crime and more of calculated, irreversible strategy. He built empires, and he dismantled lives. He had certainly dismantled hers. Brianna's breath caught in her throat. The world, previously in sharp focus, blurred into a wash of color, leaving only him in perfect, terrible clarity. As the barista handed Jason a small black ceramic cup, he turned, and then their eyes locked. It wasn't a glance. It was a collision. His eyes, a startling shade of cold, storm gray, pierced through the 5 years of distance, through the linen apron she wore, and through the wall of self-protection she had meticulously constructed. They didn't just see her. They consumed her. They were searching for something in her face, something lost, something he had deliberately broken. Brianna felt the intense heat rush to her skin, an undeniable physical response that shamed her. She tightened her grip on the burlap, her knuckles turning white. She tried to offer a cool, neutral nod, the expected greeting for an ex-spouse in a public place, but the muscles in her face wouldn't comply. Her heart, a muscle she thought long dormant, was hammering against her ribs, protesting the intrusion. The market noises returned, muffled, as if filtered through water. Jason didn't nod back. He didn't smile. He merely stood there, a granite statue of control, letting the moment stretch out into a painful eternity. His gaze dropped from her eyes to the small, barely visible scar above her wrist. A forgotten memory, a reminder of the life they had shared. A silent wound. The subtle movement of his jaw, the faint tick near his temple, betrayed the iron will it took for him not to cross the distance between them. It was a tension so thick it felt like a visible wire, pulled taut, connecting their two separate worlds. Finally, with a slow, deliberate tilt of his head, a gesture of acknowledgement that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions, Jason broke the spell. He raised the coffee cup to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers until the rim of the cup blocked his view. Brianna used the precious second of respite to turn back to the counter, her hands fumbling uselessly with the ribbons. "Breathe," she commanded herself. It was just Jason, the man who divorced you to save his own life, or yours. You don't know. You never knew. She heard his footsteps, slow, measured, confident, move past her stall. A ghost of his rich, woody cologne lingered in the air, a scent that triggered a cascade of suppressed memories. Dark leather, rain-slicked city streets, the quiet severity of his apartment. Just as she allowed a shaky sigh of relief to escape, the footsteps stopped. Ms. Vance. His voice, deep and velvety, was a caress and a command wrapped into one. He used her married name, the one he had given her, the one she had proudly dropped. Brianna slowly turned. He was a few feet away, his expression neutral, professional. The storm in his eyes was muted, replaced by a cool, almost bureaucratic reserve. "Mr. Moretti," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "I hadn't expected to see you in this part of the city." "The city is my business, Brianna," he said, using her first name this time, the intimacy slicing through the formal greeting. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the array of flower arrangements. "Your setup is impressive." It was a compliment that felt like an inspection. "Thank you. 5 years of work." 5 years, he repeated, the words hanging heavy between them. He didn't speak of their past or the reason for his visit. Instead, he smoothly transitioned, adopting the air of the consummate professional. "I'm opening a new property downtown, a corporate tower. We require a consistent supplier of bespoke floral design for the lobby and executive suites." Brianna's professional instincts kicked in, battling the residual shock. This was a massive contract, the kind that secured her business for the next decade. "I have a corporate portfolio I can send over, Mr. Moretti. I would be happy to bid." "Don't bother with the portfolio," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting just a fraction, the ghost of a smile she hadn't seen in half a decade. "I am already familiar with your work. Consider the contract yours." The absolute nature of his statement, the lack of negotiation, the sheer, effortless power, was a sudden, dizzying reminder of exactly who Jason Moretti was. He didn't ask for things. He simply claimed them. I appreciate the offer," Brianna said cautiously. "But I need the details. Delivery logistics, budget, frequency." "You will receive the full contract details by email this evening," Jason interrupted, his gaze sharp and final. "You will also be assigned a personal liaison for all communication. I will not be your contact." He stressed the last point, a clear line drawn in the sand, a boundary he was establishing even as he pulled her back into his orbit. He turned to leave, his presence receding, but his words left a clear, unsettling truth. She was now inextricably linked to his world again, whether she liked it or not. Brianna watched him walk away. He moved with a practiced grace, a dark figure against the vibrant backdrop of the market. He was almost at the exit, near the main thoroughfare, when a fleeting moment occurred. A flicker of something that was not part of the normal market routine. A dark sedan, idling just outside the main gate, slowed its roll significantly as Jason approached. And then, she saw it. A man inside the sedan, wearing dark sunglasses, raised a hand to quickly adjust a camera or a pair of binoculars focused directly on her stall. It was a fraction of a second, an instinctive movement, but Brianna's breath hitched. She wasn't an executive. She was a flower vendor. No one surveilled her. The man wasn't watching the flowers. He was watching Jason. And now, he had noticed the conversation and turned his attention to her. The sedan sped away quickly once Jason disappeared around the corner. Brianna stood frozen, the warmth of the market suddenly turning cold. The supposed business contract, the intense look, the impossible proximity. It wasn't just a coincidence. Jason Moretti had brought his world back to her doorstep, and she had a sickening, sinking feeling that the contract wasn't an offer for flowers. It was a declaration of ownership, a claim he was making on her presence, a way to keep her in sight, a way to protect her. She shuddered, not from the cold, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that the life she had meticulously built for safety was already crumbling. The architect was back, and the shadows were already closing in. Her 5 years of peace were over. Brianna spent the rest of the Saturday in a state of vibrating tension. The contract arrived precisely at 7 p.m., delivered not by email, but by a silent, impeccably dressed courier who handed her a heavy, sealed folder. The company name was Moretti Global Holdings, a cold, impersonal entity that perfectly masked the man at its helm. The terms were beyond generous, the logistics ironclad, and the personal liaison was named Victor. Brianna went over the fine print 3 times, searching for an escape clause, a trap, or a sign that the entire deal was a deliberate act of spite. She found nothing. It was simply a flawless, lucrative business offer that she couldn't afford to refuse. But the sheer speed and confidence of Jason's move, the way he had cut through the professional niceties to claim her business, unnerved her. It was the same relentless, overwhelming force that had defined their marriage and ultimately their divorce. Sunday passed in a blur of forced normalization. By Monday morning, she was sitting across from Victor at a minimalist, glass and steel cafe near the corporate tower in downtown Los Angeles. Victor was sharp, polite, and completely humorless. The meeting felt less like a briefing and more like an initiation. Mr. Moretti expects the highest standard, Ms. Vance, Victor stated, his gaze scanning the contract. Reliability is non-negotiable. My business is built on reliability, Brianna countered, her voice regaining its professional edge. My only condition is that I maintain creative control over the seasonal designs. They need to reflect the building's aesthetic, not just fill a space. Victor paused, a thin line forming between his brows. He looked up at her, a rare, direct look. Mr. Moretti signed off on your creative freedom personally. He specified you are to be left undisturbed. The word undisturbed was a chilling echo of Jason's voice. He was putting layers of buffer between them, yet every layer made his presence feel more tangible. The memory of their last conversation surfaced, unbidden, fueled by the cold environment of the corporate world. It was the night Jason had given her the divorce papers. Not with anger, but with a terrifying blank resignation. They were in their penthouse, the city lights a silent, glittering audience to their destruction. I am doing this for you, Brianna, Jason had said, his voice flat. He wore the same suit of controlled power he wore now, but his eyes then were wounded. For me, she had whispered, the single word a shard of glass in her throat. You're tearing my life apart, and you call it an act of charity? He hadn't raised his voice. He never did. You don't understand the world I live in. It's not a choice between happy and unhappy. It's a choice between you being safe or you being buried. I choose safe. Brianna remembered screaming, not yelling, but a primal, choked sound of pain, that his choice was the same as a burial. He had simply looked at her, his expression a mask of terrible self-control. He had walked out that night, leaving her with a signed document and a world that instantly became too quiet and too large. Brianna blinked, pulled back to the present by the clinking of porcelain. The coffee in front of her was bitter. The man across the table, Victor, was asking a question. "Ms. Vance? Regarding the key card access to the executive floor?" "Right. I'll need a temporary pass for early deliveries," she replied, shaking off the phantom of the past. "I prefer to set up before the main staff arrives." "Understood. Your pass will be ready tomorrow morning. It will grant you access to all necessary areas, including Mr. Moretti's private conservatory on the 50th floor. He specified the floral refresh for that area is paramount." Brianna stiffened. "The 50th floor? Why is a conservatory in his private office a priority?" Victor gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. "Mr. Moretti finds that particular space necessary for clarity." It was another one of Jason's walls, physical, professional, impenetrable. Yet she had just been handed the key. The next day, Tuesday, Brianna found herself alone in the vast, echoing silence of the 50th floor of Moretti Global Holdings. The building was stunning, the executive floor a testament to brutalist elegance. Dark marble, smooth steel, and floor-to-ceiling windows that presented Los Angeles as a miniature, insignificant toy box. Jason's office was at the end of the hall, the door a heavy slab of polished dark wood. She avoided looking at it, focusing instead on the conservatory. It was a glass sanctuary, a humid, light-filled space dedicated entirely to vibrant, exotic flora. It was beautiful, jarringly out of place, and incredibly intimate. It spoke of a hidden side of Jason she had briefly glimpsed during their life together, a surprising need for life and beauty amidst the calculated coldness of his world. As Brianna began her work, arranging miniature bonsai trees and refreshing the deep purple orchids, she felt the silence around her thicken. She knew he was there. The heavy wooden door to his office hadn't opened, but she could sense his presence like a low-frequency hum. He was just steps away, separated only by a wall and the distance of 5 years. She focused fiercely on a stubborn stem. Her hands were steady, but the rest of her body felt like a tuning fork vibrating on edge. The moment of the confrontation came, inevitably, not with a word, but with a sound. Brianna moved a large glass vase and accidentally scraped the base against the polished steel table. The harsh, grating sound cut through the silence. A second later, the dark wood door opened. Jason stepped out. He was exactly where she knew he would be, standing tall in the entrance of his office, illuminated by the cold metallic light of the hallway. He wasn't working. He was simply watching her. "Brianna." His voice was low, a rumble that filled the vast space. "Mr. Moretti," she replied, standing straight, wiping her hands on her apron. She refused to apologize for the noise. He slowly walked toward the conservatory, not stopping until he was standing right outside the glass door. The barrier was symbolic. She was inside his sanctuary, but still separated by a layer of glass and 5 years of unresolved pain. "The arrangements are acceptable," he stated, his eyes lingering not on the flowers, but on the delicate curve of her neck, then settling on her eyes. "I aim for acceptable," she said, managing a dry smile. "You aim for perfection," he corrected, the words simple, yet carrying the profound weight of shared history. "It's one of the reasons I married you." The statement was a clean, unexpected blow. Brianna flinched, not physically, but internally. "That's a conversation for another time, Jason," she said, reverting to his first name, the simple act feeling like a victory. "Right now, this is business." "Is it?" he challenged, his gaze intensifying. He took a single slow step back, moving away from the glass. "I saw a camera pointed at your stall on Saturday, Brianna. A high-grade lens. They weren't interested in the hydrangeas." The sudden, brutal revelation of the surveillance, the truth she had suspected, smashed through her composure. "Who are they?" she whispered, her voice tight with rising fear. Jason merely leaned against the steel doorframe, crossing his arms. The movement pulled the suit taut across his broad shoulders, a display of lethal calm. "People who don't like my city expansion. People who see you as an exposed flank." His eyes were like cold steel now, utterly focused. "You are protected here, on this floor, by this contract. Do not leave the premises without my explicit authorization or the accompaniment of Victor for the remainder of this week." He wasn't her husband, but his command was absolute. Brianna felt a dizzying mixture of terror and an overwhelming, shameful surge of familiar safety. "I won't be ordered around, Jason," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, you will," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Because if they come for you, I won't stop them. I will only deal with them permanently afterwards. And I prefer the first scenario." He pushed off the doorframe. The threat and the promise were clear. He was protecting her, but he was also controlling her. He walked back into his office without another word, closing the heavy wooden door behind him. Brianna stood alone in the conservatory, the deep purple orchids suddenly feeling like a beautiful, suffocating cage. She was back in his orbit, and the echoes of their painful past were now ringing with the sound of a very present and very real danger. The threat from Jason had the opposite effect of what he might have intended. Instead of instilling obedience, it fueled Brianna's defiance. She was determined to prove she was no longer the woman who could be easily controlled or simply dismissed for her own good. The next day, she meticulously followed the contract's delivery schedule, but with a deliberate detour. Instead of having Victor escort her from the office back to her car, she insisted on driving her own delivery van to pick up fresh inventory from the wholesale district, claiming a time-sensitive issue. Victor, the epitome of controlled frustration, argued briefly but yielded, sending 2 unmarked SUVs to trail her. The visibility of the security detail made Brianna feel safer, but also bitterly resentful. She was under surveillance by her own ex-husband's security team. In the wholesale district, a dense, crowded hub of commerce in the city's industrial zone, Brianna worked quickly, selecting the most vibrant tropical foliage for a high-end corporate installation. She tried to ignore the glint of the sunlight off the rear windows of the black SUVs parked down the street. It was when she paused to check her inventory list that she noticed a face. A man was across the crowded aisle, ostensibly examining a selection of potted palms. He wasn't overtly threatening, but his posture, too alert, too still, hands shoved deep into a nondescript jacket, marked him as someone observing, not buying. He was the same man from the dark sedan at the farmer's market. The realization hit Brianna like a physical punch. She didn't panic. Her heart rate remained steady, a sign of the resilience she had built over the last 5 years. Instead, she subtly changed her path, moving deeper into the narrow corridors of the warehouse, forcing the man to follow her. The thrill of the chase, dangerous and foolish, replaced her fear. She ducked behind a towering stack of shipping crates. From her hiding place, she saw the man pass, his head scanning the racks. He was searching for the exposed flank Jason had warned her about. Brianna felt a cold, hard knot of determination solidify in her stomach. If he was a threat to Jason, he was now a threat to her business and her life. She waited until he was several feet past her. Then, she took a picture of him with her phone, a clear shot of his profile and his jacket, before quickly sending the image to Victor with a single, sharp message. "Trouble at the warehouse. Man from the market is here." Before Victor could respond, a hand clamped down on her shoulder, spinning her around. It wasn't the man from the market. It was Jason. Jason was wearing a tailored black t-shirt and dark tactical pants, an outfit that replaced the suit's formality with a raw, undeniable power. He must have left his office the second Victor notified him of her detour. He was breathing hard, his storm-gray eyes blazing with a mixture of relief and absolute, terrifying fury. "What in God's name are you doing, Brianna?" His voice was a low, dangerous growl, barely audible above the warehouse noise. He pulled her against the wall of crates, shielding her completely with his body. The close proximity was a sudden electric shock. His heat, his scent, The sheer mass of his power pressed against her was overwhelming. "I'm working," she whispered, her gaze locked on his. She could feel the hard muscle of his arm against her shoulder, a physical boundary he was enforcing. "You want me protected. You need to understand where I go." "I know where you go," he snapped, his control strained to its limit. "I know every step you take. I just didn't expect you to use that knowledge to run a suicidal counter-surveillance operation." He paused, lowering his head until their foreheads were inches apart. The intensity of his gaze was a form of violence, but it was protective violence, not harmful. "Did he see you?" "He was watching the stall," Brianna admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I sent Victor his picture. I was hoping to see where he went next." Jason closed his eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his face before the mask returned. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "You are not a soldier, Brianna. You are a civilian, and you are under my protection. Do you understand the difference?" He wasn't claiming her as a lover, but as a territory, a priceless asset he could not afford to lose. It was an overwhelming display of possessiveness, disguised as protection. "I stopped being yours 5 years ago when you signed those papers," she retorted, her voice firm despite the racing of her heart. Jason opened his eyes, the cold gray now softened by a deeper, agonizing emotion. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached out, his thumb gently tracing the line of her cheekbone. It was a subtle, unexpected gesture of deep tenderness amidst the danger. "Every day since then, I have regretted the necessity of that signature," he murmured, his voice husky. "Every single day." He pulled his hand back quickly, his jaw tightening as if forcing himself back to the present danger. "The man is not alone. Victor will handle him. But you don't go back to your life. Not tonight. You are coming with me." Brianna knew in that moment she had lost the battle for control. The danger was real, and his reaction was too raw, too genuine to be a power play. It was the absolute necessity of a man protecting his most valuable, most vulnerable point. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice quiet now. "The only place they cannot touch you. My primary residence, the secure tower." He didn't wait for her agreement. He smoothly pulled her into the main thoroughfare of the warehouse, his arm a solid weight around her waist, a public declaration that she was with him. The man from the market was nowhere to be seen. Victor's team had clearly intervened. As they walked, surrounded by the subtle, ever-present security detail that materialized out of the crowd, Jason spoke in a low, even tone. "This is not a negotiation, Brianna. This is a lockdown. You will stay until I have neutralized this threat. You will not leave the premises. You will not contact anyone. Your safety is the highest priority. Nothing else matters. And what about my business? It will be run by Victor's team, flawlessly. I will not have your world suffer for my enemies." He led her out of the warehouse and directly into the back of a waiting armored SUV. The door closed with a heavy final sound, sealing them inside a small, dark cabin. Jason sat across from her. He was no longer touching her, but the confined space made his presence overwhelmingly intimate. He watched her, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering anger. "You need to know, Brianna," he said, the lights of Los Angeles beginning to blur as the SUV sped into traffic. "There is no more distance. I was wrong to think I could keep you safe by keeping you away. I was wrong to think 5 years was enough time. They found you because they know you are the key to me. And if I refuse to stay?" she challenged, her voice strained. "You won't," he replied, without hesitation. "Because the man you just exposed is a message. You are in danger. And deep down, you trust me to save you." The truth of his words, the admission that she did trust the cold, dangerous man across from her more than she trusted her own safety, hit her with brutal force. She stared out the window, watching her independent life disappear in the rearview mirror. She was going back into the cage. But this time, the cage was Jason Moretti's home, and the bars were made of his need to protect her. The drive to Jason's penthouse tower felt like a journey into a different atmosphere. As the armored SUV ascended the private ramp and sped into the underground garage, Brianna felt the increasing weight of the steel and concrete surrounding her. The environment was designed not for luxury, but for defense. The penthouse itself was a testament to his severe masculine aesthetic. Vast, open spaces, panoramic windows overlooking the entire glittering grid of Los Angeles, and an almost clinical lack of personal clutter. It was beautiful, sterile, and silent. A golden cage for a woman who valued the dirt and chaos of life. Jason's head of security, a man named Leo, greeted them with a respectful nod. He was quiet, efficient, and his eyes missed nothing. "Ms. Vance will be in the West Suite," Jason instructed, his voice flat. "Double security perimeter on this floor, Leo. No exceptions. No outside communication without my approval." The command was directed at Leo, but the message was for Brianna. "I'm not a prisoner, Jason," she stated, looking him directly in the eye as Leo collected her small overnight bag. "You are a priority," he corrected, his voice dropping in volume, intensifying its impact. He guided her to a sleek, dark wood door. "This suite has everything you need. A dedicated satellite line for urgent personal calls, a gym, and a view that reminds you what we are defending." He paused before the door, the space between them humming with unresolved conflict. "I have meetings. I won't be in your way," he added, his gaze softening slightly as he noticed the exhaustion on her face. "Try to rest. You're safe here, Brianna. Utterly safe." The safety he offered was heavy, suffocating. She walked into the suite, the door closing behind her with a sound that confirmed the finality of her isolation. Brianna spent the evening trying to work, but the laptop felt cold, and the contract files irrelevant. She was too aware of the silence, too aware of the man separated from her by a thin layer of concrete and glass. The next morning, she awoke to the aroma of coffee. Rich, dark, and exactly the blend Jason preferred. She found the kitchen to be a sleek, high-tech space with a single person in it. Jason, in tailored gray slacks and a white t-shirt, standing by the vast window, phone pressed to his ear, his profile sharp against the morning sun. He looked different here, stripped of the power suit. Vulnerable, yet more dangerous. The suit was a uniform. This was his true form. Hard, controlled, and silently formidable. He ended the call, placed the phone on the counter, and turned. Their eyes met across the vast, polished kitchen island. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than it had been in years. It was the voice of a man who hadn't slept well. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti," she replied, gripping the edge of the counter. "Jason, we are alone, Brianna. Drop the formalities." He poured a second cup of coffee. "Victor brought some clothes and essentials this morning. They are in your suite closet. I hope they are adequate." "They're fine. Thank you." She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing momentarily. The contact was brief, yet it sent a sharp, familiar jolt up her arm. She moved to sit at the island, needing a barrier. But he followed the movement, resting his large hands on the marble counter right next to her. The proximity was immediate, a heavy reminder of their shared past. "Tell me why you did it, Jason," Brianna said, staring into her coffee. 5 years ago. "Tell me the truth this time, not the corporate shield." Jason remained silent for a long moment, watching the sunrise paint the city skyline. "The truth is ugly, Brianna. I thought you would be happier believing I simply fell out of love with the disruption you caused. I was never a disruption. I was your wife. You were the truth in a world built on intricate lies. My rivals saw you as a liability. They started using your name, your movements, your flower shipments, to map my weaknesses." Brianna looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "My flower shipments?" "You had a delivery route to a rival's subsidiary building," Jason explained, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "It wasn't accidental. They were testing the limits of my control. If they could get close to your work, they could get close to you." He pushed himself off the counter, moving to the window, unable to sustain the proximity during the confession. "I went to a man named Lorenzo, a ghost. He handles the absolute worst. I put out the word that I was dissolving all emotional ties to make myself unflankable. I sacrificed the only good thing in my life to make my war zone safe for you. He turned back to her. I chose my battle, but the collateral damage was you. His explanation wasn't an apology, but a clinical, painful confession of necessity. It was a half-truth she could accept, a painful logic she could almost understand. "And you never thought to tell me," she whispered. "I knew you would fight me. You would demand to stay, to fight by my side. And I was selfish enough to want you alive, even if it meant having you hate me." Brianna stood up, walking toward him until she was only a foot away. The air throbbed with a mixture of anger and a deeply suppressed love. "I didn't hate you, Jason. I died a little when you left. I spent 5 years afraid to love anyone again, because I thought I wasn't enough to make a man stay." Jason took a small, involuntary step toward her. He reached up and gently, hesitantly, tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and the touch was an admission of defeat. "You are too much, Brianna. You are everything," he murmured. The silence was deafening. Brianna felt the emotional dam break. The past 5 years of pain, of loneliness, of unresolved feelings, it all rushed to the surface, overwhelming her. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Jason saw the flicker of pain and reacted instantly, his defensive mask crumbling. He pulled her gently forward, not into a passionate embrace, but into a strong, enveloping hug, a gesture of pure, raw comfort. "Don't cry," he said, his voice rough, burying his face in her hair. "Please don't cry. I can face 1,000 armies, but I can't face your tears." Brianna clung to the expensive fabric of his shirt, letting the torrent of tears flow. She felt the solid, unmoving strength of his body, the rhythm of his heart, and for the first time since that night 5 years ago, she felt the truth. This man had hurt her, yes, but he had never stopped loving her. When her sobs subsided, she pulled back slightly, her hands resting on his chest. Her eyes were red, but the core of the pain was released. Jason kept his arms loosely around her, his gaze intense, focused only on her face. He lowered his head slowly, deliberately. His lips met hers not with passion, but with a deep, consuming tenderness. It was a kiss of shared grief and consolation, an acknowledgement of the pain they had both endured, a silent promise that the fight to keep her safe was back on. The kiss lasted only a second, a soft pressure, a brief surrender, before he pulled away, his hands moving to cup her face, his thumb stroking her jawline. "I need to go to work," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to ensure this building is sealed." Brianna nodded, unable to speak. The kiss hadn't been about desire. It had been about the shattering of their 5-year-long emotional barrier. She watched him walk away. The straight back, the powerful stride, the dark suit he donned instantly, a man returning to his battlefield. But this time, she was in his fortress, and the small, shared moment of pure vulnerability was the only weapon she had. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted after the morning's revelation and the brief, consoling kiss. A layer of cold professionalism had been stripped away, replaced by an intimate tension that was both terrifying and familiar. They were no longer ex-spouses making awkward conversation. They were two people haunted by a shared history, now sharing a fortress. Jason spent the day in his massive private office, a silent room that acted as the nerve center of his operations. Brianna, confined to the suite, found herself perpetually drawn to the enormous living room window, watching the city below. In the late afternoon, the tension broke when the heavy dark wood door of Jason's office opened, and Victor stepped out, looking haggard. A second later, Jason appeared, his tie loosened, a rare, visible sign of stress. He was speaking into his phone, his voice a low, hard monotone. "They're moving assets. I want a full breakdown of their shell companies by dawn. I need the leak plugged now. And I don't care about the optics, Victor. Protect the primary interest." the primary interest. Brianna felt a chilling certainty settle over her. His entire empire, the vast, ruthless machine, was currently directed at ensuring her safety. The weight of his world was now pressing down on her. When he finally ended the call, he looked exhausted, leaning his head against the doorframe. Brianna walked over to him slowly. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached out and gently ran her thumb over the deep, tired lines around his eyes. Jason closed his eyes at her touch, a soundless sigh escaping his lips. "It's relentless, Brianna. I haven't slept in 36 hours. You need a break," she murmured. "You need to stop being the architect for 5 minutes and just be Jason." "I don't know how to do that anymore," he replied, opening his eyes and looking straight into hers. "The price of survival is the uniform. I put it on 5 years ago and never took it off." That evening, they ate dinner on the balcony. A simple, elegant meal, prepared by a chef who operated silently in the kitchen. The city lights stretched out beneath them, beautiful and distant. They spoke about her work, the new corporate contract, the logistics Victor was handling, a desperate attempt to maintain a neutral, professional atmosphere, but the formality was a thin veneer. As they sat in silence, the moon high above the city, Brianna brought the conversation back to the past. "The day you left," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I went through every single picture, every card. I needed proof that what we had was real, not just a beautiful lie that fit your schedule." Jason put his wineglass down, the sound sharp in the quiet night. "It was the only real thing in my life, and I tainted it to save it." "Tell me about Lorenzo," Brianna pressed. "You mentioned him yesterday. The ghost you went to. What did you trade for my safety?" Jason leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I traded my vulnerability. I made it clear that to hurt you was a violation of a specific, prearranged agreement I had with him. He is the ultimate deterrent. To touch you is to incur his wrath, a wrath that is worse than mine." Brianna felt a shiver. He hadn't just divorced her. He had performed a complex, dark ritual of protection, using his deepest contacts to create a permanent, untouchable perimeter around her. "So the men following me," she stated, "they were testing to see if the protection was real, or if I was merely divorced and exposed." "Exactly," Jason confirmed, his expression grim. "The contract was a necessary public statement. It declared to the city, and to them, that you were back under the umbrella of my direct personal interest, that you are off limits." The conversation hung heavy with the weight of the sacrifice. Brianna stood up and walked to the railing, gazing out at the vastness. Jason followed her slowly, stopping right behind her. He didn't touch her, but the air between them was electric, thick with the unsaid. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the rhythm of his breathing just inches from her neck. It was a proximity that was deeply intimate, yet perfectly non-sexual, a study in control. "You should have trusted me," she whispered, her voice laced with the pain of the last 5 years. "You should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I could have handled it." "No," Jason countered, his voice a low, rough rumble. "You couldn't. You would have been too brave. You would have fought for me. And that would have been the final exposure they needed." He reached out, his hand hovering over her hair, before he gently rested his large, warm palm on her shoulder. The weight of his hand was reassuring, a physical anchor in the stormy sea of their shared life. "I needed you to believe I was the monster," he confessed, the admission heavy with self-loathing. "It was the only way to keep the line clean." Brianna closed her eyes, leaning back slightly, allowing her head to rest momentarily against his chest. It was a fleeting act of surrender, a recognition of his pain, which mirrored hers. She straightened up quickly, maintaining her emotional boundary, but the contact had released a wave of tender regret. She turned to face him, the moonlight illuminating her face. "I don't think you're a monster, Jason," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I think you're a good man who lives in a bad world." Jason's eyes, fixed on hers, were raw, his control visibly fractured. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently touched the scar above her wrist, the one he had noticed at the market. It was a point of connection, a subtle intimacy more profound than any grand gesture. He slowly lifted her hand to his lips and placed a light, reverent kiss on the scar, the action filled with apology and lingering tenderness. He held her hand for a long moment, simply breathing, absorbing the shared space and the gravity of their confession. "Good night, Brianna," he finally said, his voice heavy with self-restraint. "I have to finish securing this perimeter." He walked away, leaving her standing at the railing, the spot where his hand had rested on her shoulder still warm, the phantom feeling of his soft kiss on her scar lingering like a promise. The line between them had cracked, and neither of them knew if they could seal it again. The next morning, Brianna found a new kind of routine established. Jason was gone before dawn, but Victor was waiting by the elevator, impeccably dressed and holding a briefcase. "Mr. Moretti has asked me to take you to the corporate tower, Ms. Vance," Victor stated, his expression impassive. "You will be safe on the 50th floor, but you will not be confined to the penthouse. Your access to the conservatory and executive lounges remains active." This was the solution. Controlled freedom. Brianna would operate within the secure perimeter of Jason's direct territory. The drive was silent, secure. When they reached the 50th floor, the atmosphere was dramatically different from the day before. The tension was palpable. The security personnel were doubled, their demeanor sharper. Victor led Brianna to a spacious, sunlit conference room adjacent to Jason's private office. "Mr. Moretti is currently in a crucial meeting regarding the assets you helped identify. He asked you to use this room. You can continue your design work here. This area is shielded, secure, and has a direct line to Leo." Brianna began sketching, but the low, muffled sound of voices from Jason's office constantly drew her attention. She wasn't just working. She was an audience to the life she had escaped, a life of high-stakes strategy and relentless defense. A couple of hours later, the meeting ended. The dark wood door opened, and a group of serious, powerful-looking men filed out. They were all sharply dressed, with the controlled confidence of people accustomed to wielding massive influence. Jason walked them to the door, his posture one of absolute authority. He paused when he saw Brianna, acknowledging her presence with a fleeting, intense glance before turning back to his associates. "Gentlemen," Jason said, his voice carrying the finality of a gavel striking wood. "The breach is contained. The counter-sanctions are in place. The cost is acceptable. This matter is closed." One of the men, a slick-haired individual with sharp eyes, paused and looked pointedly at Brianna. He gave her a polite but calculating nod. Jason intercepted the gaze instantly, his body shifting imperceptibly to block the man's view of Brianna. His action was swift, instinctual, and devastatingly effective. "Jensen." Jason's voice cut through the air, low and dangerous. "Focus on the path ahead. The past is irrelevant." The message was clear. Brianna was not an object of discussion or even observation. She was protected by his sheer authority. Jensen paled slightly and immediately refocused on Jason, murmuring an apology before retreating quickly. The moment was a stark reminder for Brianna. She wasn't just a designer here. She was a variable in his defense strategy. Her presence was a declaration, her safety a condition of his continued power. After the men departed, Jason walked into the conference room. He didn't close the door, leaving it open to his office, a silent invitation, a removal of the physical barrier. He walked to the window, ran a hand over his face, and let out a long, heavy exhale. He was utterly exhausted, the price of his ruthless control evident in the faint tremor of his hand. Brianna stood up, walking toward the coffee station in the room, pouring him a cup. She walked over and simply handed it to him. "You look like you're about to fall over," she said, her voice quiet, devoid of judgment. Jason took the cup, his large fingers brushing hers. This time, the spark wasn't one of forbidden desire, but of shared understanding. He looked at the coffee, then at her. "I can't afford to fall over," he stated, drinking deeply. "The architect has to hold the walls up, and right now, The most important wall is you. Jensen was looking at me, Brianna noted. I know, Jason confirmed, his jaw tightening. He was testing the perimeter, seeing if you were a weakness or a strength. I showed him you were an extension of my power, that you are untouchable territory. I hate feeling untouchable, Brianna confessed. I feel like a hostage. Jason put the cup down and took a step toward her, closing the intimate space between them. He lowered his voice, his gaze intense. You are not a hostage. You are the only person in this building who sees past the walls. The only one I trust to hold the truth. And that, Brianna, makes you the most powerful person here. He reached out, and with the lightest pressure, cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing gently across her cheekbone. It was a gesture of immense tenderness, a silent plea for her to see his reality. Stay close, he commanded, his eyes filled with a deep, protective urgency. Stay visible, but only to me. Let me finish this. He slowly removed his hand, leaving a residual warmth on her skin. He turned and walked back to his office, but he didn't close the door. He sat at his desk, his back to her, working, leaving the space open, vulnerable, yet utterly controlled. Brianna returned to her sketches, but every line she drew was influenced by the profound, unspoken truth. She was a part of his world now, not as a victim, but as a silent partner in his defense. Her safety was his commitment, and her presence was his declaration of war. 2 days passed in the tense, controlled environment of the 50th floor. Brianna worked on the designs, surrounded by luxury and security, but suffocated by the lack of personal freedom. She was the epicenter of a silent war. On Thursday afternoon, a crisis occurred in her own world. Finn, her assistant, called the secure satellite line. He was distraught. Brianna, the main greenhouse lost power last night, Finn stammered. The temperature dropped for hours. We lost half the tropical inventory, including the rare purple orchids for the Moretti contract. It's a disaster. Brianna felt a cold dread. The loss of the inventory was catastrophic for her business, but the timing was deeply suspicious. Losing power in a high-security industrial area was not a coincidence. It was a targeted sabotage, a pressure point aimed directly at her. I need to go, Victor, Brianna stated, turning to the security chief who was always within earshot. My entire business is at risk. Jason said he wouldn't let my world suffer for his enemies. Victor hesitated, his eyes fixed on the door to Jason's office. My orders are absolute, Ms. Vance. You are not to leave. Then I'm taking my chances, she snapped, gathering her purse. Tell Jason he can't protect me by destroying everything I worked for. I won't be a liability. Brianna knew this was reckless, but the vulnerability of her business, her hard-won independence, was an unbearable insult. She used her temporary access card, circumvented Victor by running to the secondary elevator bank, and took the express lift to the garage, determined to face the damage herself. She drove her personal car through the city, the sense of urgency overwhelming her fear. She didn't notice the 2 cars that quickly detached from the regular flow of traffic, mimicking her exact movements, one in front, one behind. When she reached the greenhouse district, the building was dark and cold. Finn was waiting outside, pale and frantic. The police said it was a surge, Finn whispered as Brianna unlocked the reinforced door. But the lock was tampered with. Brianna stepped inside, the chill air hitting her face. The damage was extensive. As she walked among the rows of wilting frozen plants, she realized the attack wasn't just on her inventory. It was a deliberate act to force her out of the secure tower. The trap snapped shut immediately. As she knelt to inspect a damaged heating unit, the back door of the greenhouse burst open. 2 figures, large and masked, rushed in. They didn't speak. They didn't carry weapons. They moved with a chilling, predatory efficiency, aiming only to grab her. Finn screamed, but Brianna didn't move. She knew this was the moment Jason had tried to prevent. She was the decoy, and she had activated herself. One of the men grabbed her arm, his grip hard and non-negotiable. She fought instinctively, pulling away, trying to use the thick foliage as a shield. Just as the second man reached for her, the main warehouse door exploded inward with a deafening crash. The sound wasn't of a lock breaking, but of a heavy vehicle impacting the frame. The air was instantly filled with blinding floodlights and the sharp, rapid commands of men speaking into headsets. Jason appeared in the center of the lights. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in full tactical gear, dark vest, dark clothing, a warrior who had abandoned the pretense of civilization. His eyes, illuminated by the glare, were fixed on Brianna with a look of terrifying, absolute fury. "Hands off," he commanded, his voice amplified, a deep, resonant roar that silenced the attackers and Finn instantly. The two masked men, realizing they were outmatched and surrounded by Jason's massive, coordinated security team, immediately dropped Brianna and bolted for the small back door. Jason's men, silent, professional, didn't pursue. Their sole objective was Jason's command. Jason didn't spare a glance for the fleeing attackers. His entire focus was on Brianna. He covered the distance between them in 3 long, powerful strides. He pulled her to him, his arms closing around her with a fierce, almost violent relief. He didn't speak, but his body was trembling slightly, a raw, uncontrollable reaction that spoke volumes. Brianna clung to him, burying her face in his shoulder. She could feel the hard, cold material of his gear, the intense heat of his body beneath it. The terror subsided, replaced by the overwhelming, familiar safety of his embrace. "You idiot!" he finally ground out, his voice hoarse, his grip tightening. "You foolish, brave idiot! You used yourself as bait!" "You wouldn't let me go," she sobbed, holding on to him fiercely. Jason didn't release her. He held her there, shielded and secured, until the entire perimeter of the greenhouse was secured by his men. He looked up at Finn, who was still standing frozen by the door. "Finn, you call Victor. He will liquidate this property tomorrow. Every asset will be transferred to a new, secure location. Your job is now full-time liaison for Ms. Vance's design work. She is not to come within a mile of this location again." It was a cold, complete demolition of the dangerous ground they stood on. Jason then released Brianna, holding her by the shoulders. His eyes were dark, intense, burning with a mix of fury and love. "We are done playing at distance," he stated, his voice final. "You are coming back with me. You are not leaving my sight until this is resolved. I cannot, will not, live through a moment like that again." He didn't give her a choice. He led her out of the ruined greenhouse, past the silent, efficient security team, and into a waiting tactical vehicle. Brianna didn't argue. She was exhausted, shaken, and utterly undone by the sight of him in full defense mode, a man who had dropped everything to personally enter the line of fire for her. As the car pulled away, she leaned her head against the cool glass. The cost of her independence had been too high. The only thing that mattered was the warmth of the man sitting beside her, the hard reality of his protection, and the silent, terrifying realization that her life was now inextricably bound to his, whether she fought it or not. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Brianna was wrapped in a thick, dark blanket provided by one of Jason's security team, still shaking from the encounter. Jason had stripped off the heavier tactical gear in the car, revealing the black protective vest beneath and a large, dark bruise already forming high on his left shoulder. He had been injured. Not gravely, but the wound was visible, a crack in the architect's armor. When they reached the secure penthouse floor, Brianna immediately took charge, her previous defiance forgotten, replaced by a deep, urgent need to care for him. "You need to see a doctor," she insisted, taking his arm. "It's a contusion, Brianna. I hit the doorframe on the way in. It's nothing," Jason dismissed, his voice clipped with pain and exhaustion. "I need to secure the system." "You need to sit down before you bleed through your shirt," she countered, her own voice firm with a protective urgency that mirrored his. She led him into the West Suite, the familiar space suddenly feeling safe and quiet. She found a first aid kit in the bathroom, her hands moving with the steady competence of a woman who had once navigated a life full of his accidental injuries. Jason finally yielded, sinking onto the edge of the large bed. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the city at twilight. Brianna gently cut the fabric of his shirt to examine the bruise. It was dark, deep purple, and severe. Jason clenched his jaw, enduring the examination in silence. The air thrummed with unspoken history. "It's bad, Jason," she murmured, her voice filled with tenderness. "But no breaks. You need ice." As she applied a cold pack, her movements were focused and gentle. She was closer to him than she had been in 5 years. Close enough to smell the unique mix of his clean scent, the remnants of gun oil from his gear, and the subtle, salty trace of sweat. "Why did you come down there yourself?" she whispered, her eyes locked on the dark mark on his skin. "You have dozens of men. You could have sent Leo." Jason looked away, focusing on the distant city lights. "I saw Victor's message that you had gone. Then I saw the heat signature of the 2 men closing in on the property perimeter. I didn't think. I couldn't." He turned his gaze back to her, his storm-gray eyes filled with a raw intensity that was terrifyingly honest. "Brianna, 5 years ago, I didn't just walk away from you. I went through hell to ensure you were forgotten. I destroyed every connection, every memory I could, publicly and privately, so that if my enemies ever got close, they would find nothing of value." He paused, his voice cracking with the pain of the memory, not the injury. "The thought of them finding you, of them putting their hands on you, I lost control. I don't lose control." He reached out and wrapped his large, warm hand around her wrist, stopping her movement. His grip was firm, but not forceful, a plea for her attention. "They are coming for me," he confessed, the words heavy and final. "And you are the only thing I have ever truly feared losing. I had to be there." The confession hung in the air, the complete truth she had always needed, presented not as an apology, but as a statement of his most fundamental weakness, his love for her. Brianna felt a fresh wave of tears, but this time they were tears of profound realization, not pain. She placed the ice pack on his shoulder, and then, moving slowly, she knelt in front of him. She didn't speak. She simply placed her hands gently on his powerful forearms, the silent gesture signifying her understanding and acceptance of his dark world and the sacrifice he had made. Jason watched her, his expression melting into a rare, open vulnerability. He reached out and cupped her face again, his thumb gently stroking her jawline. "I love you, Brianna," he murmured, his voice broken, the confession carrying the weight of 5 years of silence. "I never stopped. The divorce was a lie designed to keep you alive. That's the truth. Everything else is a tactic." Brianna leaned in, pressing her forehead against his chest, right above his heart, listening to the powerful, erratic rhythm. She looked up, her face wet with tears, her eyes shining with love and the terrifying acceptance of their reality. "I love you too, Jason," she whispered, "and I hate you for making me safe by destroying us." Jason pulled her gently up, his arms closing around her. It was a hug of total commitment, a silent promise that the sacrifice was over and the defense had begun. He leaned down, his lips finding hers, not with a demanding passion, but with a deep, consuming tenderness and fierce regret. It was a kiss of reunion, a silent, absolute claim, filled with the devastating reality of their past and the dangerous promise of their future. He broke the kiss slowly, resting his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice barely a breath. "Stay with me and let me finish this war." Brianna pulled back, looking into his eyes, now shining with a fierce, protective light. She nodded, the decision made. She would fight the war by his side, from the safety of his fortress. Following the intense confession and the shared moment of vulnerability, the dynamic between Brianna and Jason became one of total, focused unity. The danger had stripped away all pretense, leaving only the fierce loyalty and love that had never truly died. Brianna settled into the routine of the war room, the large conference space adjacent to Jason's office. She didn't interfere with his work, but her presence was a constant, stabilizing force. She organized his files, made his coffee, and provided the quiet anchor he desperately needed. Jason's office had transformed into a command center. Maps, data projections, and secure lines dominated the space. His strategy against the rival faction, the one that had targeted her, was a masterpiece of cold, strategic brilliance, true to his moniker, the architect. "They attacked your supply chain to draw you out," Jason explained to Brianna late one night, gesturing toward a complex digital map on the wall. "They knew my weakness. Now, I use that knowledge against them." His plan was not one of street violence, but of economic and informational warfare, crippling the rivals' infrastructure, freezing their assets, and exposing their internal vulnerabilities using irrefutable legal evidence that his network had meticulously collected. "It's like watching a chess match where the entire board is the city," Brianna commented, watching him direct his team with quiet authority. "It's precisely that," Jason agreed, his eyes focused on the screen. "And the queen must be absolutely protected until the checkmate is delivered." The next 48 hours were a relentless cycle of tension and silence. Jason worked without sleep, his focus absolute. He rarely looked away from the data, but Brianna felt his presence, a tether of commitment and protection. In a quiet moment, as Jason leaned back, rubbing the tension from his temples, Brianna approached him. "You haven't slept," she stated, her voice gentle. "I can't. The moment I close my eyes, I see that warehouse door crashing open and those men grabbing you." He looked at her, his storm-gray eyes filled with a raw exhaustion that broke her heart. "I will not fail you again." Brianna walked behind his chair. She began to gently massage his neck and shoulders, working the tight knots of stress and power. The physical act of care was profoundly intimate, a silent communication that she was committed to his survival. Jason leaned back into her touch, letting out a deep, satisfied groan. He reached up, his large, warm hand covering hers, pressing it firmly against the taut muscle of his neck. 5 years of distance was easier than this proximity, Brianna, he murmured, his voice husky. "This makes me weak. I can't think about anything but you when you are this close." "Then don't think," she advised, her voice a soothing balm. "Just feel the support." He stayed there for a long time, allowing her to anchor him. The moment wasn't one of passion, but of profound interdependence. A powerful man letting down his guard for the only woman who knew his true weakness. The climax came in the early hours of Saturday morning, precisely 1 week after their encounter at the farmer's market. Jason was standing at the command center, a secure phone pressed to his ear. Brianna was sitting on the sofa nearby, watching the tension radiating from his posture. "Confirm," Jason commanded into the phone, his voice steady, carrying the chilling calm of a man who had won a war without firing a shot. "The warrants are issued, the assets are frozen, the leadership is contained, and the press release is ready." He hung up the phone. A heavy, profound silence fell over the penthouse. The war was over. Jason turned slowly, his eyes finding Brianna across the vast room. He walked toward her, his pace measured, the man of business slowly transforming back into the man she loved. When he reached the sofa, he sank down beside her, the relief and exhaustion hitting him simultaneously. He didn't speak. He simply reached for her, pulling her close, resting his head on her shoulder. His arms closed around her with a fierce, protective certainty. "It's over," he whispered into her hair, the words a raw confession of victory and relief. "You're safe. Permanently." Brianna wrapped her arms around him, holding the weight of his enormous frame, the silent, terrifying commitment of the last week finally lifting. She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. They were no longer storm-gray and cold, but soft and warm with an undeniable, clear love. "We did it," she whispered. Jason didn't reply with words. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a long, deeply emotional kiss of relief and triumph, a shared acknowledgement that they had faced his world and won. The kiss was fueled by 5 years of yearning and the terrifying closeness of the last week. He broke the kiss only to rest his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "The walls stay up," he commanded, his voice thick with emotion. "But from now on, you are on the inside of every single one of them." The war was won, but the new reality had just begun. Brianna knew the danger would never truly vanish, but standing in the heart of the architect's power, protected by his unflinching love, she was ready. The days immediately following the checkmate were characterized by a profound, almost luxurious calm. The security presence in the penthouse remained, but the oppressive urgency had lifted. Jason's life slowly began to revert to its highly controlled, complex schedule, but Brianna was now a permanent fixture within its core. They existed in a state of quiet, tender intimacy. They shared morning coffee overlooking the newly tranquil city, discussed the details of her now thriving corporate floral contract, and spent evenings reading quietly in the vast living room. Brianna's fear was replaced by a pragmatic acceptance. She loved Jason, and she accepted the reality of his world, a life of immense power, constant vigilance, and unrelenting security. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a pact made in the shadow of danger. One afternoon, Brianna noticed Jason standing by the conservatory on the 50th floor, looking at the orchids. He was in his usual impeccable suit, but his posture was relaxed, a rare sight. "The purple orchids," Brianna commented, walking up to him. "They're exactly the same shade as the ones that died in my greenhouse." Jason looked at her, a gentle smile touching his lips. "I replaced them, all of them. And I purchased the entire greenhouse building. It's under a new secure shell corporation. Your business is safe, Brianna. Permanently. You bought my entire operation," she murmured, shaking her head in amazement. "You are truly the architect." "I am a man who protects what is his," he corrected, his voice deep with conviction. "And what is ours?" That evening, they were on the balcony, the city lights reflecting in the large glass table. The air was cool and serene. Jason was quiet, watching the lights, but his large hand reached across the table and covered hers, intertwining their fingers. The gesture was simple, domestic, and utterly grounding. "5 years ago, I didn't give you a choice," Jason began, his gaze serious. "I cut the line because I thought it was the only way to save you." He turned his focus entirely to her, his storm gray eyes soft but unwavering. "I can never offer you a normal life, Brianna. My life is this building, this city, this constant vigilance. But I can offer you honesty, and a fortress built on absolute commitment." He squeezed her hand gently. "I need to know, without the fear of immediate danger influencing your choice. Do you choose this life? Do you choose me? Knowing the price of admission is a lifetime of looking over your shoulder?" Brianna didn't hesitate. She had spent the last week seeing his truth. The man who would risk everything to keep her safe. The man who suffered for his protection. She leaned in, her eyes shining with love and acceptance. "I choose you, Jason Moretti. The distance was worse than the danger. I choose the fortress. I choose the safety you offer, because it comes from a love that survived the destruction of our world." A genuine, deeply felt smile spread across Jason's face, a smile that reached his eyes, chasing away the cold shadows. It was a smile she hadn't seen in half a decade. He slowly brought her hand to his lips and placed a long, tender kiss on her palm, a silent promise, an unwritten contract of the heart. "Then the contract is signed," he murmured, "and this time, it's for life." Brianna and Jason continued their journey, a study in contrasts. The flower designer and the architect, the light and the shadow, irrevocably bound. Their life became a carefully choreographed dance of intimacy and high-stakes strategy. They were seen together in guarded public appearances, a declaration to the world that Brianna Vance was not a former wife, but the central, fiercely protected partner of Jason Moretti. She learned to love the silence of the penthouse, the absolute certainty of his commitment, and the profound, consuming love that existed only when the heavy doors were closed. Their story was not about an easy, tranquil love. It was about a love so fierce, it survived total destruction. A love that chose to build a future not in spite of the danger, but because of the commitment forged within it. Jason had sacrificed his happiness for her safety. Now, they would build a shared life based on that sacrifice. They chose to believe that even in the most dangerous, controlled environment, the most beautiful thing to bloom could still be love. If this story of intense protection, forbidden love, and second chances moved your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, Stories of Love and Romance, to experience many more emotions with us. Comment below